Chapter 26, Practice. The footsteps echoed in the dark, narrow corridor, and spread far and wide in a quiet, no noise. With her back straight, Klein followed the middle-aged priest slowly and slowly. No questions, no small talk, just like a calm lake. Passing through the guarded passageway, the middle-aged priest unlocked a secret door with a key and pointed down a stone staircase. Crossed to the left is Chain's Gate. May the goddess bless you. Klein dots her chest for times to outline the shape of the crimson moon. Secular uses secular rituals. Religious uses religious rituals. Praise the goddess. The middle-aged minister responded with the same gesture. Klein said no more and walked down the stone steps into the darkness with the help of elegant gas lamps on both sides of the walls. Halfway there, he turned around and saw the middle-aged clergyman still standing in the doorway at the top of the steps, in the shadow of the gaslight, like an immovable wax figure. Klein looked back and continued down, and before long, he touched the cold slate floor until he reached the intersection. He did not turn in the direction of the Chain's Gate because Dunsmith, who had just taken the shift, was sure not to be there. Following the familiar path to the right, Klein reclaims another staircase and emerges inside Blackbriar's security. Seeing the door closed or ajar, he did not look recklessly, but entered the reception hall and saw the brown girl with a sweet smile reading a magazine. "Hi, Roseanne." Klein comes to the side and taps the table on purpose. "Go bang." Roseanne stood up, knocked over her chair, and said hurriedly, "Hey, it's a nice day." You, Klein, what are you doing here?" She put her hand to her breast and gasped twice, like a little girl afraid of being caught lazy by her father. "I have something to talk to the captain about," Klein responded briefly. "I was scared to death. I thought the captain had come out." Roseanne glared at Klein. "Don't even knock." "Well, you're lucky I'm a kind lady." "Well, I prefer the word girl." "What do you want with the captain?" "He's in the room across from Mrs. Oriana." Even though her spirit was tense, Klein was brought to a smile by Roseanne and said, "Secret." While Roseanne's eyes widened in disbelief, Klein bowed slightly and made a quick exit. He re-entered the partition door of the reception room and knocked on the door of the first office on the right. "Come in, please." The deep, gentle voice of Dunn Smith sounded. Klein opens the door, closes her hands behind her, takes off her hat and salutes. "Good morning, Captain." "Good morning. What can I do for you?" Dunn's black trench coat and hat were hanging from a nearby hat rack, his body exposed only in a white shirt and black waistcoat. And even with a high hairline and dark gray eyes, he looked much fresher. "Someone is following me," Klein answered truthfully, without embellishment. Dunn leaned back and clasped her hands together, her deep gray eyes quietly looking into Klein's. Instead of picking up the stalking topic, he asked, "You came from the church?" "Yes," Klein answered in the affirmative. Dunn nodded slightly, neither good nor bad, and returned to the subject. "It could be that Welch's father didn't believe the cause of death we reported and called a private investigator from the Windy City to investigate. Kingston City, also known as the Windy City, is a highly developed area in the coal and steel industry, ranking among the top 3 cities in the Kingdom of Ruin." Without waiting for Klein to weigh in, Dunn continued, "It could also come from the source of the note. Well, we're trying to figure out where Welch got the Antigonus note. But of course, we can't rule out other individuals or organizations that are looking for the note." "What should I do?" Klein asked in a hushed voice. No doubt he wanted to be the first reason. Dunn didn't answer right away. He took a sip from his coffee cup, his gray eyes unmoving. "Go back the way you did before, and then do whatever you want." "Any?" Klein responded by asking. "Any?" Dunn nodded affirmably. "Of course, don't scare them off, and don't break the law." "All right." Klein takes a breath, turns away, leaves the room, and returns to the basement. He turned left at the intersection, bathed in the glow of gas lamps on both sides, and walked quietly in the empty, dark, cold passageway. The rattle of echoes adds up. The more lonely, the more fearful. Soon, Klein approached the steps and, stepping up, saw the middle-aged priest standing in the shadows, in the doorway. When the two met, neither opened his mouth, and the middle-aged priest turned in silence and gave way. After a silent journey, Klein returned to the great prayer hall, where the light from the round holes behind the vaulted altar was still pure. The darkness inside the room was still quiet, and the line of ladies and gentlemen outside the confessional room was still, but much smaller. After waiting for a while, Klein walked slowly out of the great prayer hall and out of St. Serena's church as if nothing had happened, holding his cane and newspaper. As soon as he went out, he saw the sun, and suddenly he had the familiar feeling of being watched, just like the prey of the eagle. Suddenly, a doubt arose in his mind. Why didn't the peeper follow me into the church before? Although that way, I can still use the dark environment and the help of the priest to deceive him briefly disappear. But it is difficult for him to pretend to pray and follow the surveillance. I didn't do anything wrong. What's wrong with going in there? Unless he has a dark history, fears the church, fears the bishop, knows that the other may have extraordinary powers. So the possibility of a private investigator is very, very low. Oomph! Klein exhaled, no longer as tense as before, and walked leisurely around to the back of Zotlin Street. He stopped in front of an old, modeled building with the number 3 and the name Zotlin Shooting Club. Some of the police department's underground shooting ranges are open to the public to earn extra money. As soon as Klein enters, the feeling of being watched disappears, and he takes the opportunity to give the Special Operations Department badge to the waiter in charge of reception. For a little verification, he was led underground to a small, enclosed shooting range. 10-meter target. After a brief explanation to the waiter, Klein removed the revolver from her arm pocket and the brass-colored cartridge from her clothing pocket. Suddenly being targeted, his desire for self-preservation overcame his procrastination, and he couldn't wait to practice marksmanship. Pah! After the waiter had left, he swung out the wheel, ejected the silver hunting bullets one by one, then picked up the brass-colored normal bullets and stuffed them into the nest. This time, he did not leave any space to prevent misfiring, nor did he take off his formal coat and half-top hat. And he had to practice in the most ordinary dress. After all, it is impossible to shout, "Please stop. Let me change a set of light clothes," after encountering the enemy and encountering danger. Bang bang, Klein closed the wheel and slid it around with his thumb. Suddenly, he grasped the gun in both hands, suddenly raised it straight, and aimed it at the target 10 meters away. But he did not rush to shoot, but seriously recalled a military training miss experience and 3 lines: shooting recoil and other common sense. Sploo, sploo. In sound of clothing, Klein practiced aiming and holding over and over again, as seriously as a child taking the college entrance exam. After many repetitions, he retreated to the wall, sat on a long, soft stool, put his revolver to one side, massaged his arms, and rested for a long time. After spending a few minutes reflecting on the incident, Klein resumed his handgun with a wooden grip and copper wheel, moved to the firing position, made a standard stance, and pulled the trigger. Bah! His arm shook, his body leaned back a little, and the bullet missed the target. Bah! 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 Learning from the experience, he shot one shot at a time, fumbling with the feeling in practice until all 6 bullets were shot. Start hitting the target. Klein sat back down and took to breaths. Pah! He flung out the wheel and let the 6 casings crash to the ground, then continued to insert the remaining brass-colored bullets without changing his expression. The activity relaxed the lower arm, and Klein stood up again, summing up and returning to the shooting position. Bah! 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 As gunfire echoed and the target shook, Klein practiced and rested again and again. Illuminated the 30 normal rounds he received and the remaining 5 before. Gradually steadily mounted the target and began to pursue the number of rings. Shaking his aching arm, he emptied the last 5 casings, lowered his head, and tucked in one after another of the intricately patterned silver hunting bullets, leaving room for misfiring. With the revolver in her arm pocket, Klein patted the smoke and dust off her body and, with a sense of relief, walked out of the firing range and back onto the street. With the feeling of being looked at again, Klein was calmer than ever as he ambled down the Rue de Champagne, took the 4-pence tram back to Iron Cross, and entered the apartment where he was staying. He took out his key, opened the door, and saw a man in his late 20s, wearing a linen shirt and with very short hair, sitting at his desk. Her heart tightens and she relaxes. Klein smiles and says, "Good morning. No, good afternoon, Benson." This man is his and Melissa's brother, Benson. Moretti, only 25 years old, with a receding hairline and an older face, looks almost 30. He has dark hair and brown eyes. He bears a resemblance to Klein, but he does not have the faint bookish air. "Good afternoon, Klein. How was your interview?" Benson stood up with a smile on his lips. His black coat and half-top hat were hanging from the ridges of the high and low beds. "Very bad," Klein replied with no emotion. Benson was stunned, and Klein added with a chuckle, "In fact, I didn't interview at all. I got the job early for 3 a week." He repeated what he had said to Melissa before. Benson softened his expression, shook his head, and smiled. "It's like seeing a child grow up. Well, it's not a bad job." He sighed and said, "It's good to hear such good news when we come back from the trip. We must celebrate tonight and buy some beef." Klein was, "Okay, but I think Melissa would be distressed. Why don't we go grocery shopping this afternoon? Bring at least 3 soles. Well, to be honest, 20 soles to the pound and 12 pence to the sole, and a half penny and a quarter penny. It's so counterintuitive and troublesome that I think it must be one of the stupidest in the world." After that, he saw Benson's expression become serious and suddenly a little uneasy, wondering if he had said the wrong thing. Could it be that in the missing fragments of the original owner's memory, Benson was a pure, extreme kingdom advocate who could not tolerate a little denial? Benson paced a few paces and read her tegravely, "No, none of them. None of them." Klein was stunned, quickly reacting and smiling at her brother. It was Benson's wry humor. Benson, with the corners of his mouth turned upward, a dead solemnly, "You must understand that a reasonable and simple currency system requires the ability to count and to master the decimal system, which, unfortunately, is too rare among the great men.